Howdy howdy, Sudevil here, and welcome to another video inspired by a comment. There has been a stealth change to the Thane. Thank you very much, Brachycera, for bringing that up. We will get to that right away. I'm going to go over the stealth change, I think what it means, and I want to go over the dwarf heroes in a bit of a broader sense. I really want to get input from this video down in the comments to see what your thoughts are on the dwarf heroes and then maybe the future of dwarf heroes, where they're at, and what you think of my thoughts. So I will go over that, the rest of that, very shortly. So basically, Foe Seeker and Deadly Onslaught are exactly the same. Ironbeard's Ring, 22% weakness to fire damage, is the same, but the Silver Horn of Vengeance has changed from a 36% charge bonus to a plus 12 charge bonus. And it costs 95 gold. Okay, so what does this mean? I guess, you know, the Silver Horn of Vengeance is still... it's still just an incredibly poor choice for a dwarf, you know, especially if you know, I can see how maybe they want to give some sort of kit to give dwarfs charge to encourage charge-based gameplay maybe, or something like that, but it just doesn't fit. And this is a big buff compared to the 36% charge bonus, because if you look at our dwarf warriors, I mean, they only had 12 charge bonus to begin with. That's a 100% increase to your charge bonus. Same with even a unit like a Longbeard with Great Weapon that only has 16. You know, that's 30. That's way more than 50%. And even a unit like Hammers that only have 18. That's more than a 50% increase to charge bonus. So it's pretty big. But charge bonus, you only get that plus 12 to your melee attack and damage on the very first hit. And then it goes down fast over 13 seconds, so you're going to get 3 uses of that ability. You know, compare that to like WoW or something like that, which is global, or you know, the Bonewood Staff, or even some of the other abilities that you can get. I mean, it's a, you know, dwarves don't have cavalry. Like this, you know, where the Silver Horn of Vengeance might be useful, you know, is with a faction that had cavalry, and they still wouldn't take it if it was a plus 12 charge bonus. I'll tell you that much, because a lot of cav can get like an 80 charge bonus, and you know, like just to give an example, we'll go to Warriors of Chaos and let's grab their. There we go, Chaos Knights, 80 charge bonus. You know, these Chaos Knights, 44 charge bonus. So, you know, this might be useful for another faction if it was a charge bonus and the charge bonus was like 40, you know, or something like that. 495 gold. If you could put a 40 charge bonus for 95 gold, maybe it might be useful. I don't know. It's just not a doughy thing. And so I thank you very much, Brachycera, for pointing that out. I love comments of all kinds. Again, just a comment to say hi. You know, if you're doing some analysis or you've had some thoughts, I just love hearing comments, and this is why I've got another video here. And I wouldn't have noticed this change to the Silver Horn of Vengeance because I never look at it. You know, plus 12 charge bonus. Is it better than it was? Yep. Is it useful? No. The Thane is gone from the meta. You know, again, you might see some very specialized beards to make some very specialized beards, some very specialized builds to make use of this 22% weakness to fire that may be useful in some situations. You know, it's kind of like, you know, building a house of cards to get to this perfect scenario that this 22% weakness to fire damage makes the Thane useful. So I wanted to have a bit of a discussion about dwarf heroes and, you know, the Thane specifically, Runesmith, Master Engineer, and then maybe future heroes that I can see the dwarfs getting, and how I think they should be considered if not changed. I'm not saying this is the absolute way they should be changed. I really do want some input or thoughts down in the comments on how you think Thane should be. Now, So I'll go over this. Now, first of all, I've said this for a long time, and a lot of people have said this actually, is there should be two versions of the Thane. There should be a sword and board Thane that's very defensive, and a two-handed Thane with armor piercing. Now, they kind of almost tried to do this with these ethereal Thanes. So one is very defensive, and one is more, aggressive. The only difference is, I mean, this one has 17 more stat points. Lun Ironhammer and Half Stonebeard has a silver shield, but neither of them have two-handers. So, I think that makes sense. There's a lot of pictures with Thanes with two-handers, and you could really separate the Thanes as far as their function. And I see them doing that and try to find good uses for different lords and different characters. So, first of all, okay, I don't like the change, but I do like that they changed it, if that makes sense. That means they're looking at this ability. They're looking at dwarfs still. I mean, a change like this doesn't just magically occur. Right? Someone had to approve it. Someone had to suggest it, and that suggestion came from somewhere, probably from other YouTubers. Like, there was a few big YouTubers I saw mention how crappy the Silver Horn of Vengeance is, how bad it is for the dwarfs, and maybe that spurred someone to suggest we change it. We'll just make it a flat bonus. That'll be more useful. It'll be 100% charge bonus, and so they're still looking at it, and they can look at fast changes. So what do I think the dwarf heroes should look like, and what kind of, I guess, philosophy should guide them? Now, the Thane in the lore is very close to a lord in a lot of cases. I mean, that's your next step into a lord. They're heroic champions of the dwarfs. They're leaders of other Daoi. They're true leaders. Not that runesmiths and master engineers aren't, but they're different. Thanes really are the future lords and the great leaders of the Daoi forces that are not lords yet, and often they have their own small cracks, maybe, stuff like this, or they can lead armies. In the tabletop, Thanes are incredibly good because they're very, very inexpensive, and they really do help out your army. So things like that, like tabletop doesn't translate directly over, although I do want to try that tabletop mod, which I think will be really cool. So, first of all, I think you should have two Thanes. You should have a defensive Thane and an offensive Thane. Now, the offensive Thane, really give him a two-hander, a little more weapon strength, a little more charge bonus, and armor piercing, more melee attack, less melee defense, no shield. He can keep Deadly Onslaught and Foe Seeker, and you can make his abilities, like this ability right here, where is it? The Rune of Slowness, minus 12% speed, and maybe not 8% charge bonus, but that would be perfect on a two-handed Thane. Like, the Master Engineer doesn't really need a Rune of Slowness. I can see you can slow down things that get in the back line, but that would actually be really useful for a two-hander Thane. And I'll talk about, some of the Master Engineer's abilities in a bit. So, for your defensive Thane, what kind of things would be good to have a Thane that's going to lead your troops, who's maybe not going to be chasing down big things or anything like that? And I came up with a list of some abilities, and I'd love to hear some of the abilities you'd like to see. And these are not just straight out of tabletop, because I think there's room in the gameplay to look at these. But first of all, I'd love to see the Thane have an ability kind of like Rally, but that you could target a routing unit and instantly rally them and give them a immunity to psychology and plus 10 leadership for 30 seconds or something like that, so they won't just get rerouted. Something like that, really useful. Now you have another tool in the kit for the Thane. The Hammer of Karak draws should actually be on the Thane as a defensive tool instead of the Runesmith. Now, I like the Runesmith. The Runesmith is kitted out quite nicely, but this Hammer of Karak draws, would be probably better fit on the Thane, the defensive Thane, because that's going to be able to target onto a unit that's trying to kill your lord, or the Thane himself, minus 44 melee attack, minus 25% weapon damage, and it only recharges if engaged in melee. Perfect. He can engage in melee. Your runesmith is not real great in melee. So something like the Hammer of Carrick Draws. I would love to see you have abilities down here that you can take, and they're like a little passive, like immunity to psychology. Now I know the Rune Lord has that right here, the Rune of Hearth and Home, but I think something like that, like, and maybe he keeps it, maybe as a different version, but a defensive Thane, you know, leading your troops directly, having that ability as one of your items, the Rune of Hearth and Home. You know, your Thane could make your weaker troops immune to psychology and kind of go off with your miners and dwarf warriors and that kind of thing. Again, you know, just a small ability like this within a 40 meter radius, everyone he comes close to has an immunity, or sorry, expert charge defense as a passive AoE you can get as a rune, you know, to represent your Thane, you know, leading and getting troops ready to accept a charge. You know, these are the type of kind of abilities that would make sense on a defensive Thane to me. You could even look at giving him an ability that would be, like, you pay for it, of course, but it'd be like a passive vigor aura, like the Grumbling Guard has. You could kit out a whole bunch of things, like, you know, to make your Thanes more of a thing. You know, you look at a magic user, like, you know, I don't know, grab, look at, you know, let's just look at Manfred. You know, he has so many spells and stuff down here. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff. So there's no reason. There's some things, you know, you look at some lords and stuff that have tons and tons of abilities, like Marathi, you know, lots of abilities, and in the minor. So there's a lot of rooms there. So there's no reason you couldn't have the Thane with a number of abilities, so you could kit out your Thane, your defensive Thane, the way you wanted to. You could also put in here Guardian. That's a nice little ability they've added to some units, like I think they added it to Bretonia, and is it the Paladin? Paladin, Deadly Onslaught, Guardian. There you go. It's a perfect ability to add to a Thane's kit. I mean, 150, it's expensive, but within 30 meters, you give another lord or hero 18% physical resistance. So your defensive Thane could help defend your lord or a runesmith or something like that. It's a perfect ability for the Paladin, a perfect ability for a Thane. And also, lastly, if you're going to give him a clicky, he doesn't need Deadly Onslaught and Foe Seeker. Like, you could replace those. Those would be for the two-handed Thane who's going to use Deadly Onslaught and Foe Seeker to catch someone, right? A one-handed Thane, you might, you know, have a melee defense and leadership AoE, kind of like Stand Your Ground, like those types of things. So that's kind of conceptually how I'd like to see the Thane. So you could have abilities and items to build out a defensive Thane the way that you wanted to. And I think that would be fantastic. And if you go by that, a defensive Thane would never have a Silverhorn of Vengeance, and an offensive Thane, maybe if it was like plus 30 charge bonus or plus 40, something really insane, because you don't get to, you only get 13 seconds of use out of that, even though it says it's a 22-second buff. You know, I get it. I mean, it'll last for that, but you know, you could look at this weakness to fire. I actually think this ability, interestingly enough, would be best on the Master Engineer, and I'll tell you why in a second. But so for an offensive Thane, again, you could have that slowing aura. You could look at giving your offensive Thane this ability, which I don't think is that great on the standard Lord, which is Perfect Vigor. You know, maybe you give your offensive Thane Perfect Vigor. Or Banner of Lost Holds, which is plus 5 melee attack, plus 6% weapon damage. These kinds of things that would separate these two. Now, the Runesmith, I think, is really, really good. I like the way the Runesmith is kitted out, but I think the Hammer of Carrick Draws would be better on a defensive Thane. And the Master Rune of Groth, 1-Eye, plus 8 leadership, I don't know. What I would prefer to see for the Runesmith, actually, is another rune that you can cast on one of your own troops, which gives them a which gives them resistance to magic. Now, you could make it cheap. We already got a resistance to magic, and there's other ways to do that, but that could help against spells like Fate Abuna and things like that. I think that would be just a nice clickable. You could bring it, you may use it, may not. And another thing to add to your runesmith would maybe be an item that gives everyone within 40 meters magical damage. Something like that. You know, and the ability also to calm the winds of magic. So one of the things that is pervasive in, you know, we'll grab the vampires, and because they have this is what is it? Master of the Black Arts. Increase to power reserve swinge of magic, improve power recharge rate, you know, Curse of Undeath. There's like, here we go, sort of unholy power, improve power recharge rate, and increase the power reserves. Another thing, I think both the runesmith and the rune lord should have the option of buying and bringing is something to reduce the winds of magic, which is lore friendly and just a nice bit of kit, right? So the runesmith doesn't need much. I think the runesmith is great. You know, if they left the runesmith like this forever, is it a bad thing? No. But it'd be nice to see them, you know, maybe because they're putting this focus on heroes, it'd be nice to see that kind of hero completed, I think. And, you know, like being able to cast extra magical resistance on a single unit as a rune here, as a cheaper ability, you know, that's up every 90 seconds or something, would be really great. Being able to give yourself an aura to give the troops around you magical damage might be useful in some matchups. You know, you just kit out the runesmith a little bit better and kit out the Thane. And then what you're doing is, I'm not saying get the Thane with the two-hander in there right away. I'd love it. But what you're doing by setting up the defensive Thane this way is so that when your offensive Thane comes, it adds a whole new element of gameplay for the Dowie. That's what I'm saying. You set up the defensive Thane to be like that, and when you get that offensive Thane, it's like completely awesome. Now, for the Master Engineer, I think they've improved the Master Engineer a lot. They didn't do some of the things that I would have liked them to do, but anyways, Fire Ring Authority, I just don't even think it should be there. I wish they would just get rid of it. I hate seeing it, but you know, Prospector's Eyeglass, a Spyglass, perfect. 18% accuracy, awesome. Rune of Slowness, don't know if that should be there. Now, his abilities, extra powder's cool, but it doesn't affect, you know, maybe, I don't know. Ballistic Calibration is one that affects everyone, I think, including the Master Engineer. I think it's great. Now, Entrenchment, I think this would be, you know, we look at what Master Engineers can actually rebuild damaged or protect artillery. It would be nice if you had an ability that would, the way it would work out in the game would be like a heal for artillery. That'd be the only way you could do it, but you could have an ability to heal artillery and along with his ability to protect artillery, and you know, make it big so that if someone gets in your back line, you can protect artillery and you can also heal artillery. It would be an interesting reason to bring the Master Engineer. And another ability I'd love to see the Master Engineer have is the ability to kind of like an entrenchment here. Now, except an ability to defend units from artillery fire. Just like an aura ability. It might be expensive, sure, if it's 200, but if it gives you 30% resistance from artillery fire, that'd be really cool, because you could protect some of your more expensive units on the way in if you didn't have your own artillery. It'd give the Master Engineer a little bit more utility, and it would make sense in the lore. Now, as far as the items I would really like to see, now I like this Prospector Spyglass. You know, I think that's reasonable. I mean, it might be better in abilities, but what I would love to see is just a set of bullets to load out with your Master Engineer. Now, this is exactly where you could make the Master Engineer a true utility, which he could be, and I'd love to see where you could say you have normal slugs, you could have magical slugs, you could have fire-based slugs, you could have slugs that cause a weakness to fire damage, which would replace this ability on the Thane. you know, which would be pretty cool. Like if you hit something with a slug that causes a weakness to fire damage, you could help support your other unit. You know, an armor sundering slug, you know, like a loadout like that where you pick the slug you're going to load. It's not like you can load, you know, all 10 slugs and have magic armor sundering, weakness to fire, awesome, amazing bullets. It'd be neat if you could just to have down here, your items would be just the slug you're going to load. They're all mutually exclusive. You pick your loadout, whether it's going to be normal, and maybe normal slugs, you know, is the default selection, and those slugs have something special to them too. I don't know, but it'd be neat if there was just like a whole bunch of different bullets here, and you pick the slug loadout you're gonna bring with your Master Engineer. I think that would be really cool, because then you know, your Master Engineer might be useful in a number of different matchups, because maybe one matchup for fun he can bring a slug that causes a weakness to fire damage, and another one maybe we're going to be fighting the vampire count, so you can bring magical you know, slugs that do magic attacks, you know, some kind of armor sundering, you know, this would be super cool and would make the Master Engineer a choice in more matchups, and would allow for more interesting builds. And then, you know, you have those items, and you have his abilities. Again, not only abilities that can, like this, I think you take these two abilities and change them, but this ballistic calibration is really cool. I love this ability. It's really neat. But you make an entrenchment that's kind of like a passive, you protect things from artillery only. So if your opponent doesn't bring any artillery, well, you know, you've just bought this for nothing. That's the way things go sometimes. But if he does, and you don't bring artillery and you're rushing in, you can protect some of your more expensive units. You could also, like this entrenchment, you know, but it's really, it's instead of the plus 40% armor piercing missile damage, I would really like to see a much bigger resistance, and I'd like to be a ward save. So you could really cast this on, and you could only cast this on, well, I don't know, whatever. Like, I'd like to see be a big ward save to protect your own artillery, and I think that would be really great. So make the Master Engineer. He's getting better. They're looking at him. Give him this really cool loadout for bullets, or the slugs he's going to load, and give him some abilities that are going to be useful for artillery, for artillery, for ranged units, and potentially to protect non-artillery. So he might even be useful in a build where you have no ranged units, where you just give him a real thin loadout, and the only thing you bring is protection from artillery, just to help get your expensive troops into the line, and he has, you know, just magic bullets because he's going to focus on one thing, and you might be able to use him in more situations, is what I'm saying, and I'd love to see that for the Master Engineer. So really, that's my thoughts on the 3 heroes so far. I'd like to talk about, well, you know, Silver Road of Vengeance. It just kind of makes me laugh, but I'm glad it was changed. Not that it's going to be used, but because they're thinking about it. Now, as far as future heroes, you know, future heroes, obviously a Thane with a great weapon, and that would fit nicely right here. And the other obvious hero that the Dowie could use is an anti-large hero. And we all know, you know, kind of what we'd like to see. I mean, there's those that have talked about Felix and Gotrek, and I would love to see a named hero as a anti-large. Same with Joseph Bugman as a ranger hero. I think once you've got your basic heroes in, your Runesmith, your Master Engineer, and your Thane, bringing in a few named heroes, particularly an anti-large hero, anti-large armor piercing. We'll make sure we get that in there, or maybe just an anti-large to complement Ungram. I don't know, but I imagine you want anti-large armor piercing, and then, you know, like a Joseph Bugman, or maybe a few other little heroes like that. And eventually, I mean, I can't remember who suggested giving the Master Engineer the chance for a gyrocopter mount, but boy, oh boy, would that be awesome. And gyrocopters, by the way, they should have perfect vigor. They should never get tired. But anyways, Yeah, so I mean, I'd love to see a Slayer hero and a Ranger hero and another Thane hero. You know, I think you know, it's not like the Dowie have bad choice in lords. Their lords are all pretty decent. You know, but if a little bit of extra work on the heroes, along with, of course, the miners, the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, and the Longbeards with great weapons, I think would be great. So, anyways, I would love to hear your thoughts on the Thane specifically, your thoughts on this stealth change. You know, it wasn't exactly widely trumpeted. I didn't see it on any of the patch notes. Maybe I missed it. And maybe it was somewhere. You know, thanks Brachysera for pointing that out. So, I don't know why they wouldn't say this, that they've changed an ability completely. Like, they didn't say some of these other, well, maybe just because they didn't think it was important enough, or because they just wanted to float it and they didn't want to make a big deal of it. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what that means. Are you in the same boat that I am, that you're actually happy that they changed it, not because of what it was changed to, and not because it's going to make the thing useful, but because they're looking at it? I mean, I love that they're looking at it, even though they didn't change it in a way that I really like. But I mean, I love that they're looking at it. And then lastly, you know, your thoughts on future heroes, or a Thane with a two-hander, and those types of things. And love to hear any little tidbits of lore, if you have any, on the Thane. You know, I'm not an expert on Warhammer lore. You know, I read little bits here and there, and but you know, the Thane is a pretty spectacular hero in the Warhammer lore period, because he's very inexpensive and he does a lot for what he costs in the tabletop, and he is definitely not that in Total War Warhammer. Even when he had the Tormentor Sword, I mean, he didn't do a whole lot. He was kind of like a one-trick pony, you know, get your Thane over to stop something. I would love to see your defensive Thane be that buffing machine, be that leader, be that guy who can bring back your troops from routing, you know, to give them expert charge defense, because he's out on the field yelling at his kin, you know, this is how you do it, wait, stand firm, here you go, like that kind of thing. And he could be quite useful and quite interesting. And definitely love to hear your thoughts on the Master Engineer. I mean, the Master Engineer is getting better, there's no doubt about it. They're looking at it, but I'd love to see his items just be filled with different sorts of slugs. I think that would be amazing, like rune inscribed slugs to do different things. That would be fantastic, and a few different abilities to make him useful with or without artillery or ranged units in the build, where you could just kind of take him in a very minimalistic loadout for a very specific task. I think that would get the Master Engineer into the game more. Anyways, definitely want to hear from you in the comments down below, and with that said, I hope you found it interesting, and I will see you soon.